Hey everyone, since the last video I've finished Lumbermill's plot system to automate the harvesting of trees, added some new items, and a new factory machine. For those new here, Lumbermill is a factory builder and management game I'm building solo in the Unity game engine, so let's get into it. Up until now, the only way to chop trees was to select a lumberjack, then select an area for them to chop down, and then let them go. There was no way to be more organised, and it also meant lumberjacks constantly needed supervision. So, plots solve these problems by allowing the player to automate the complete cycle from planting to felling. In the last devlog, I added the ability to create new plots, and the first part of the cycle, felling, and now we're on to the second part, clearing. Here I'm designing a spruce tree stump, which will be left over after lumberjacks fell trees. These take up space and need to be removed in order to plant new trees. I got those into Unity and created a new template object which all spruce stumps will come from. Once those were in the game, there were a couple of problems. Firstly, I just didn't really like the design, the perspective looked a bit off. Secondly, lumberjacks would often ignore each other's personal space entirely and all go for the same tree. And finally, there were some problems with the layering of sprites, with lumberjacks appearing underneath stumps. So I went back and made some changes to the design first. Those looked better in-game, and I like the size variations for different trees, but they're still quite small. To fix the problem of all the lumberjacks going for the same trees and stumps, I added the ability for individual lumberjacks to claim them and prevent others from claiming the same trees and stumps. This unexpectedly created a new bug where lumberjacks would chop down a tree and then walk back to their camp rather than finding a new tree. Looking at the AI, this red X means that the route to plot action is failing, preventing the employee from finding a new tree. That shouldn't be happening. So it turns out that the lumberjacks would chop a tree down and the AI would restart as it's meant to. The plot always keeps track of all the trees within its boundaries, and because of a quirk with Unity, the tree the lumberjack just chopped down has only been marked for deletion, but not actually been deleted yet. So the plot thinks the tree is still there. The lumberjack asks for the nearest tree in the plot, and because it's standing next to the remains of the tree it just chopped, that's the tree it finds. Pathfinding to that tree then begins, which can take a few frames. By the time the pathfinding has finished, Unity has deleted the tree and replaced it with a stump. The lumberjack sees a stump rather than the tree it was expecting, and the AI fails, defaulting into the idle state. A complicated bug with an easy fix, deregistering the tree from the plot immediately rather than waiting for Unity to delete it. The next problem, where stumps would overlap lumberjacks, was also quite simple. I moved the stumps onto a different layer so that they always get rendered before staff. At that point, lumberjacks were felling an entire plot correctly, not all going for the same trees, and stumps were being left over. There was a clear size difference between stumps in the forest and logs on the conveyor belts though, so I went back to adjust those sprites some more. I eventually settled on these variations, but also needed to carry those changes over to the trees themselves. Switching those new trees in, I still wasn't quite convinced and ended up making ancient spruce trees taller to account for the wide trunk. This was where I left things, and although it's a subtle change, it means there's now a lot more consistency between trees in the forest and logs on the conveyor belts. I also drew stumps for maples and adjusted the trees themselves to account for the new changes. The default settings for the procedural generation don't really create many maple trees, so I made a new type of island that's just maples for testing. It's unlikely this particular island type will ever show up in the game, but I'm happy with how the maple trees and stumps look here, so moving on. For the clearing phase to complete, lumberjacks need to be able to remove stumps, so I added a new action to the Lumberjack AI for removing them and adding them to their inventory. When I tested that, I discovered another weird bug where lumberjacks would remove stumps when standing a few tiles away from them. That seemed like a pathfinding problem, and I decided it would be helpful to be able to visualize all the obstacles in the world to see where exactly the pathfinding was going wrong. Everything in red here is a tile that's blocked in the pathfinding. The white line is the current route, and you can see here that lumberjacks definitely seem to be taking indirect routes sometimes. I recorded that as a high priority bug, but I don't think it's the cause of the stump removal problem, so I'll come back to it. Anyway, I've been talking about stumps for a long time now, and after a bit more work, I got to a point where lumberjacks remove all the stumps correctly and they can be processed in the factory, either burnt as fuel or converted to chips which can be sold. Next up is the planting phase. I spent a while weighing up different approaches and decided the best was to add a new machine called the Nursery, which will take seeds as input and convert them into plantable seedlings. Once I had that showing up in the build menu, I also added it to the tech tree so it can be unlocked with research. I also set up all the connection points for the machine to link with conveyor belts and created new item types for seeds and seedlings. This is a really simple machine, so getting that working was nice and straightforward. The player selects a species, a seed enters the machine, and when the timer completes, a seedling comes out. In order to plant those seedlings, I needed to turn my attention to the Arborist employees. These employees handle anything to do with maintaining the forest, so having them plant the seedlings seemed to make sense. Once I'd made a very simple first version of their behaviour tree, I started testing the new planting phase on a treeless island. It worked, but there's a pretty major problem where arborists would plant new trees, which would then block them from being able to easily access other empty tiles in the plot, so more pathfinding issues. A lot of the time this could mean the planting phase never actually finishes because tiles become inaccessible. My solution for that was to add a new growth phase to the trees. At the moment, saplings take an entire tile and block the pathfinding, a red tile on the overlay I created earlier. So I created a new much smaller seedling phase which doesn't block the pathfinding. Seedlings then grow into larger saplings once the planting phase is complete. Seedlings also need to be able to travel along conveyors, so I made a variation of that sprite with the seedling in a pot, which is what will come out of the nursery machine. Testing that, I was pretty happy with how they looked, and newly planted seedlings no longer cause any pathfinding issues. I also added a new window which can be toggled at the top of the screen for enabling and disabling different overlays. Overlays are a layer on top of the forest for visualizing certain things like where plots are. I'll likely be adding quite a few more of these, such as where power lines and pipes are. I've got obstacles as an option here, but that's just for me to be able to test the pathfinding. Finishing off, I also planned out a design for the nursery. It's been a long time since I've designed any new pixel art for machines, and I mostly just wanted to figure out the logistics and various layers here. At the moment, this design is heavily based on the greenhouse building, and I'm not 100% certain on it yet, but it'll do for now. I'm just glad that items respect the various layers of depth in the machine properly, which was something I'd always struggled with in isometric previously. With all of that done, plots are now fully automated. Arborists plant trees, lumberjacks fell them and clear the stumps, and the cycle begins again. That means the entire process of growing new trees can be fully automated, but players also have the option to still do all of this manually. I think this has made a huge improvement to how the game plays, and there's still more to come, so make sure to subscribe for future devlog videos. I massively appreciate any support for the game's development, and the easiest is wishlisting the game on Steam. I also have a Patreon where I post updates before the devlogs, and I'd like to thank the top patrons since the last video: SOF, Matthias Bader, and Per Harold Nygaard. That's all until next time, thanks for watching.